go ahead and get started. I think we're going to have Autumn kind of go through the departments that are on the Drought Task Force. So if you are representing one of the departments, just speak up as she goes through.
Water and Resource Conservation.
I'm here.
Emergency Services Officer. Butte County Water Commission Chair. Deputy CAO. Public Works.
Here.
Environmental Health.
Here.
Ag Commissioner.
This is me, I'm here.
UC Cooperative Extension Farm Advisor.
Here.
California Department of Fire, Butte County Fire. NRCS. RCD. We have a quorum.
Okay, great. So today, just a brief overview of our agenda. We're going to be going through the drought impacts analysis study with just have a discussion with possible recommendations to the board. And then we'll have some various updates from the departments from water resources, environmental health, ag, if fire shows up, and any other reports that anyone else wants to bring up. And then at the end, the public that wishes to address the Drought Task Force, you can come to the podium. And then we'll also discuss kind of standardizing our meeting dates and times for the next few months. So with that, I am going to share my screen and talk a little bit about the Drought Impact Analysis Study. And hopefully you all can see that. Okay, I am going to caveat this whole discussion with, I am not going to go through the entire drought impact analysis study presentation that was provided to us by Ludorf and Scalmanini, but I will note that Cab from Ludorf is on participating today. So if there are some specific questions, he can be available to answer. The intent of just this overview is to review some of the information from the drought impact analysis study, big picture, broad, again, not going into specific details. There was a lot of information presented. So as you know, the Board of Supervisors had a presentation given to them by Ludorf and Scalmanini on the drought impact analysis study. That was back in April on the 24th. And then the draft or the final document was submitted or put out publicly a couple of weeks ago. And then last week on June 1st, the consulting team did a webinar for the public, and that was pretty well attended. I can't recall. You can come sit up here. Okay. Yes. The chair of the Water Commission is here. So the webinar was last week to discuss the drought impact analysis study. So hopefully at either of those two meetings, everyone had an opportunity to at least see one of the two presentations. So just an overview of what I'm going to talk about today is just a preview or a purpose of the study, some of the activities to date, an overview of the contents of the study, and then the next steps and recommendations. And hopefully that's where a majority of our discussion can be. All right, I'm going to fix my screen really quickly. So why was this report needed? The report is built on ongoing work done by the Butte County Drought Task Force and the Water Commission. The need for additional support was discussed by the Water Commission in June of 2021, and the board made funding available later that month and last year. The drought impact analysis study was needed to understand the impacts of the current drought conditions. And keep in mind, this was for last year, so it really focused in on last year. And then the report also focuses on assessing the surface water and groundwater systems in Butte County and the surrounding counties for 2021. and exploring established systems for historically handling drought, such as increased groundwater pumping and water transfers, as well as an economic framework in which to view these impacts. So that was all covered in the study. Again, the contents of this study included an overview of 2021 conditions, water transfers in the Northern Sacramento Valley, and you can come sit up here too. A groundwater demand, groundwater levels in the North Sac Valley, evaluation of drought impacts, and some next steps to improve drought resiliency. All right, so just kind of jumping into section 2 of the document, which was an overview of the 2021 conditions. It talked about the climate, stream flow, groundwater, water elevations, reservoir levels, some reported dry wells, well completion reports, ag acreages, drought restrictions, and ecosystem response. So I pulled many of these slides, most all of these slides from the webinar presentation. I think in total there were like 62 slides. I'm only a fraction of that. So there were some key things that I pulled out of that presentation just to kind of set the stage here. So as you know, precipitation in the 100-year record of Northern California in 2021 was the 3rd driest year, and in 2020 was the 10th driest year. Obviously, stream flow in the Sacramento River was low flow conditions, even when compared against recent critical dry years. There were some drought restrictions, such as the state water project allocation was only 5% last year, and there were also surface water curtailments. And then some of the potential ecosystem impacts included hydropower, salmon impacts to salmon populations were reduced, and habitat impacts as well. So those are all discussed within the document. Section 3 dove into the water transfer programs in the North Sac Valley, also included water transfer costs and some of the cumulative impacts of water transfers. Just as a quick background, temporary water transfers that were included in the document were based on water transfer information management system. The transfers that were discussed were 3 transfer types, which included crop idling, groundwater substitutions, as well as reservoir releases. Individual agencies apply to do water transfers, and DWR, Department of Water Resources, approves them, and no temporary water transfers from Butte County occurred in 2021. Temporary meaning short-term. Section 4 talked about groundwater demand and groundwater pumping in the North Sac Valley. And the groundwater demand information incorporated multiple sets of information, and there's a list of them there, included the Land IQ 2018 land use survey, remote sensing of rice fallowing, surface water deliveries, review of surface water rights. It included the Butte Basin groundwater model information, etc. And it also simplified monthly water balance approach was used to estimate groundwater pumping. Section 5 of the document talked about aquifer conditions and groundwater well summary information. And I think I'm going to talk about that a little more here in more detail than the other sections. So it did talk about groundwater level and change, and the methodology for that is included in the document. I'm not going to go over that in detail. It did talk about reported dry wells in 2021. And the source of that information was from the My Dry Well websites, DWR's website, as well as county records. And you can see there's a difference, substantial difference between what was reported by My Dry Well. That was its voluntary reports on the DWR website. And I think Kelly in the past has given a demonstration of that website to this group. or at least to the Water Commission. And then county records were at 19. I do know that when someone reaches out to Butte County Environmental Health, the Environmental Health does encourage people that have dry wells to also report them to the My Dry Well water site. And so Butte County began collecting data on new well permits in 2021 to assess if a well permit was issued because of a dry well condition. It wasn't necessarily something that we had asked previously. The report does talk about shallow domestic wells, dry or diminished capacity wells providing water for household use can cause a hardship to those that have experienced it. And to estimate the magnitude of potential well outages, the consultant Ludorf and Scalmanini conducted a well vulnerability study in Butte County. And that information is also included in the report. It did note that for vulnerable domestic wells that are projected for this year, the Durham area has the most vulnerable wells, followed by north of Chico and the Oroville area. And 55% of those vulnerable wells are from the 1980s. So age does also play into it, age and probably depth of those wells. So again, all of this information is in the study. The report identified about 139 potentially vulnerable wells, and they also broke them into some of the subbasins within the county, being the Butte subbasin, Vina and Wyandotte Creek subbasins. So that information is in the report. And then I should also note that the report also does discuss, and Cab, correct me if I'm wrong, potential vulnerable wells in the foothills as well. So it doesn't just focus on the valley area or the subbasin areas. And they also added information about agricultural wells. When I say added information, that was between when the Board of Supervisors saw the presentation in April and then to the May presentation and into the report. And so agricultural wells are significantly less vulnerable, but 22 vulnerable wells have been identified, and they were all completed prior to the 1990s. Section 6 of the document talks about the evaluation of drought impacts. The consultant has an economic kind of framework. It talks about ag impacts, municipal and industrial impacts, impacts to outdoor recreation and domestic wells, as well as government and environmental impacts. And so the document has this kind of framework that they use to evaluate some of those impacts, and they kind of group things into buckets, and they're in the red, the agricultural, public water supply, domestic wells, government and ecosystems impacts, and really linking to the economic impacts associated with each of those categories. It talks about the cost to agriculture in drought. The cost of water accounts for 5 to 10% of the total cost in Butte County, which is compared to other areas in the state. The cost of water is about 15 to 30% of the costs for ag. And the costs are substantial for farmers who supplement surface water supplies with groundwater supplies. To summarize some of the agricultural impacts, areas that utilize surface water in normal years pump more in drought years, which is expected, obviously. Total cost of water compared to total cost of production remains low, but may increase in the future. Agricultural transfers are limited to 20% of acreage in a district, which is per California Water Code. Butte County Chapter 33 requires a permit for groundwater substitution transfer, and none have ever been applied for in the county. Drought plays a small part in the total revenue per acre, and returns to farmers are higher from transfers than in rice production, and broader economic impacts in Butte County will depend on how water transfer revenues are spent. There are impacts to outdoor recreational activities. Drought decreases, obviously, recreation opportunities on rivers and lakes because of reduced water. These lost opportunities are implicit costs of drought, and which are called non-market effects. To get a sense of the potential non-market costs of drought, the consultants used Lake Oroville as a case study and compared the number of visits to the Lake Oroville State Recreation Area when boat ramps were closed in 2021 to prior representative years and the representative years I think were from 2016 and 17, which were pre-flood and dam issues, pre-campfire and pre-COVID. So that's we had to go back some years to get some actual data that was usable. And they used estimates of economic value of the number of recreation days based on just his literature that is available to calculate the dollar value of decreases in recreation. They looked at the changes in Lake Oroville boat ramp visitation, and the associated values there was approximately $4 million loss in recreation values just from days when the boat ramps were closed. Further surveys could be done to quantify lost recreation values at Lake Oroville and along the Sacramento River, and additional direct market economic impacts if residents from outside the county visit and recreate locally and spend money on food, lodging, et cetera in the county. So that's revenue lost there as well. Some of the impacts addressed were to domestic water users. 25% of Butte County's population does rely on domestic wells for water. Domestic wells are used on the valley floor where there may be impacts from agricultural pumping, as well as in the foothills where dry wells can be attributed to drought conditions. Just that's based a lot on geology in the foothills. New installation of domestic wells have been deeper than previous years. Just to summarize, estimated cost to truck water to a family of 2 per month is about $346. So for those wells that have gone dry, they used either, we had some water filling stations, but also water hauling opportunities. Domestic users face the most severe impacts of the drought due to potential loss of water supply. Limited information on what a cost-effective solution to dry wells may be, and approximately 25 customers with dry wells annexed to a public water supply in 2021. So if a domestic well user was near a public water supply source, I think in this instance it was Cal Water, they annexed in and were able to get their water supply from Cal Water. Some of the environmental impacts, obviously discussions around the various habitats are impacted by droughts, including wetland habitats. 100,000 acres of rice would be flooded for winter decomposition compared to 300,000 in a non-drought year. DWR did invest in $8 million in the drought relief waterbird program. Wildfire, obviously previous work on campfire shows 23.2 billion in losses and 5.6 billion in indirect losses, such as a disruption to the supply chain. So obviously drought does increase wildfire risk, not only in the county, but throughout the state. And then there's environmental impacts, obviously, to ecosystems as a whole. Ecological impacts of drought ripple through communities, and further work is needed to evaluate impacts to various ecosystems. The document does talk about costs associated with fire, and obviously there's firefighting costs, property damage, health costs, defensive expenditures, costs in air quality monitoring, and decreased work hours. So there's also implicit and non-market costs associated with drought and fire as well. So section 7, and hopefully this can be the meat of our discussion today, are the next steps to improve drought resiliency. So the report does list some opportunities for improving drought resiliency in the county. And they're listed here: countywide assessment of future drought risk, and we by source, including surface versus groundwater, as well as land uses, potential update to the county drought planning and management policies, including the water shortage contingency planning, and our drought preparedness plan. Integration with regional water planning processes, kind of syncing with IRWM and GSP planning processes, as well as developing projects that can be included in GSP implementation. Improve water shortage contingency monitoring and reporting mechanisms, perhaps early warning signs, dashboard metrics for condition updates, and then drought response to minimize impacts on Butte County users and residents. Perhaps an update to the existing well ordinance for depth to minimize chances of going dry, well depth to minimize those chances of going dry, and then surface water and groundwater drought response, and keeping in mind that surface water is managed year to year and groundwater is managed decade to decade. The document talks about integrating regional policies and talking about kind of a bigger picture and regular drought cycles moving forward, and our drought preparedness plan and other DWR policies and regional documentation to help address drought at a larger scale. Also, the document suggests some public outreach should be developed to support major drought planning and response, as well as the drought preparedness plan. And then the document does talk about several funding opportunities that are available, including DWR, Small Community Drought Relief. We have received funding from that program for some of our activities here in the county. We've applied for state revolving fund projects more related to water quality, but those funds are available to us, as well as there's new funding programs that are coming online as well. So just the next steps: improving our understanding, improving our response, and potentially pursuing grant funds for different projects and things that we identify here. So really today, the discussion focusing on some possible recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. I will say that the initial intent was to bring recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, was going to be at their next meeting on 6/14. However, just given the timing of the webinar and the information coming out, that we have some time, and we'll bring recommendations to the Board of Supervisors in at the end of July. They only have one meeting in July, so it would be the second meeting, or the one meeting of July, which is on the 4th Tuesday. I don't know the date of that. So we do have a little bit of time. So with that, I'm just going to kind of open it up to the Drought Task Force. If there's things that stand out to you, thoughts, maybe just kind of do a little round robin discussion and see where we go from there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So I'm just going to open it up. Do you like how I'm looking at you?
Since you're looking at that, I'll go first. I can share some recommendations that I've come across in my work with USDA and RCS.
Can they hear him okay?
There, is that better? Okay. One is as the county develops and gets smaller parcels, the county ought to encourage parcels that have intact surface water to remain so. And whatever that would encourage through the agency that I work for,
Maybe
And-
tell everyone who,
the NRCS, what we do is when a farmer comes to us and asks for cost share funds, we have them remain on surface water, and we put a drip system or a microsystem or some type of newer, updated, more efficient system with the surface water intact and keep that surface water viable. The other one is to encourage them to be able to overcome drought or curtailment or something like that. You can have a split system where you can basically just turn a valve and have the groundwater accessible to that system that also in case the surface water isn't available at that time. So that's one way the county can just kind of make sure that the water resources, taken into account and valued and used to keep our soil profiles full. And the other one would be to a recommendation I would have would to be to encourage water storage and whatever means possible. If it's on a small lot or something like that, have a 2,000 or 5,000 gallon tank storage as part of the development plan or part of a drought resilience plan for parcels in general. And that's all I can share with you for now, but that would be my recommendations.
great, thanks, Dan. Anyone? Do you have anything?
Tammy, this is Louis, Petty Ag Commissioner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just wanted to touch, you had a slide there with revenue per acre, I believe. And, just to clear that up or make it more cloudy, I guess, or clear up, it is basically for our commodities, it is based on supply and demand, and it is market driven, whether it's domestic or globally. So I don't know how much impact of water has on the revenues per acre for commodities. Obviously, when you don't have water, you're not going to be able to produce the commodities that we have in the county. This year, I believe we were still around 80 to 85,000 acres of rice that's been planted. You also referenced, I think from the last meeting, crop report data. And so that crop report data is just raw data that our growers get for their commodities when they sell commodities. It's not exponentially increased for products moving through the processing. This is basically just raw products that are being sold from growers to the marketers or processors. And I believe Tracy Shore through Luisa Spino had shared a document regarding rangeland, pasture land. I think you have that. If not, I can forward that to you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, Louis. Does anyone else have any thoughts? Oh. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Once the drought task force goes through, and then we'll just open it up for public thoughts and comments.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is Ernie Washington, Butte County Water Commission. The only thought I had was what I think I expressed previously to Tammy and Cammie, pardon me, at the meeting recently. Wouldn't necessarily save water, but would perhaps ameliorate the impact on people with shallower wells if farmers got together in geographical areas and coordinated their time of pumping so they didn't create cones of depression that would impact their neighbors. And somebody would have to kind of spearhead getting together groups in various geographical areas.
Thanks, Ernie. Any other task force?
Um,
This is Elaine.
Oh, good. I was just going to ask you a question. So great. Thanks, Elaine. Go ahead.
I just wanted to speak to our county well ordinance. We do intend to start a real thorough review of the ordinance, looking at it through the light of drought and climate change. And we expect to start that within the next year. We're trying to time it with the state well standards that are predicted to come out within the next year. So we want to wait to do our ordinance change or updates with that information. So I just wanted to let everyone know that that is scheduled within the next year.
Great. That's what I was going to ask you. Thanks.
this is Luis Espino, Cooperative Extension.
Hi, Luis.
So one thing that comes to mind, and maybe this already exists, if there, just like there is a system to report domestic wells that are failing or drying, agricultural wells that are having issues. I don't know if, you know, groundwater agencies, if they monitor that. Because, you know, when I was trying to gather information for the task force, it was just anecdotal, you know, what we've been hearing, but there's no, I didn't have any access to hard data of, yeah, this many wells, the water's dropping, or this many wells are pulling sand and things like that. It might help have a better understanding on what's happening in orchards that rely on groundwater. That I think with surface water, we know the irrigation districts know how much they're cut, so it's easy to kind of figure out the impact, but it might not be as easy with groundwater.
Luis, one of the slides it talked about or estimated that about 22 ag wells would have issues with the drought. Do you think that's kind of consistent with what you've seen or would expect to see?
I
No, you
don't
don't
know. I don't know.
Hey, Kelly, if you're available, does the My Dry well reporting allow it? It can be any wells, right? And then you identify if you're domestic or ag or some of the issues there?
Well, the My Dry well reporting system is really intended for wells that have gone dry due to the drought that are for household uses.
Okay.
There is a spot in there where you can indicate what the well is used for, and so you can choose from a drop-down menu that says, you know, household or ag or a combination of both. But yeah, Luis, you've got a good point, because that particular reporting system is really geared towards household well uses only.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments from the Drought Task Force? All right, I'm going to go to public comments, and we'll start with those in the room. Tasha?
From the report, I did notice that they are comparing estimates of current years to estimates of prior years, and it seems to be estimates on estimates on estimates, and I never got much sense that there is somewhere in there a reality check, and it would be great if there could be a better sense of that. I would also like to see things like this Drought Task Force acting quicker ahead of the state rather than waiting for the state to impose really onerous things. We could have started conserving, and in fact, people in Butte County were asking for it well over a year ago. And it's the sort of thing that could have put us ahead of the game in ways that I think would have been really good. I do know in the report, they mentioned at certain parts that they kind of take this excess pumping during dry years and lack of pumping during wet years is just a given without really putting in a measurement on it. And in fact, one of the slides actually says they ignore that, which to me was kind of distressing. But then just from the idea that was presented right here at the dais with the idea of coordinating among neighbors, the pumping, and I'm sure that most of these pumps have something where they say we do X number of gallons per hour. And if you kind of are standard that they're supposed to be meeting when they sold you the pump. And if you had a rough idea of that and the hours of operation, you would actually have a much stronger idea of what is being pumped from the ground that would be based on at least something that has a tie to reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sasha. Go ahead. Sure. Jim, I do see your hands raised. We'll do people here in the audience and then I'll call on online. Go ahead.
My name is Lynn Bellanti and I live on Michael Way, just north of Eaton Road. I actually came to a meeting last summer and I did go to a couple of Board of Supervisors meetings when they did approve to declare a drought emergency so that we could try and do something to help those of us with residential wells who are going dry. I've managed to make it so far. I'm kind of surprised. My well is 100 feet. I had it lowered to 95 last summer and I got lucky. That's not pulling up any sand. So I'm going to be, I'm at 95. I actually tried to be proactive, and last May, a few of my neighbors, there's 7 houses on my street, they had deepened their wells years back. So they're probably going to be okay. They're at like 180 and 250, but the other 4 of us were at between 85 and 110. And so are the 2 streets around us. We were made city 2.5 years ago. But kind of ironically, they're doing this development right across the street from Eaton Road, and they finished it, the paving Eaton Road. It's kind of the old part of Eaton Road last August, and they brought the water lines halfway across Eaton Road to the divider. And my neighbor, who has connections with Cal Water, said he could not get them to cross Eaton Road. So we don't have, and that they're not going to want to tear up the brand new 4-lane road they just did. So us 3 streets, Michael, Vermees, and Johnny Lane, and some people did run out of water already. I tried to be proactive last May. I got a tank from PBS Supply. I started calling water drillers last May because I was afraid of what was going to happen. And I actually took out a contract and paid a deposit with Heitman. And he said he would make it out this winter. He came out and said, now he can't do it. And he gave my money back. I got a tank last May and I did get a water hauler to fill it up. There is still water in it because I didn't run out, but it cost me $150 to fill it up. And I'm not going to be able to afford to keep filling it up. So the reason I'm here today actually is because I thought you'd be making recommendations to the Board of Supervisors next week. And I do plan to go next Tuesday. At the end of last summer, a recommendation was made, if people had a tank, they could go to a site and get filled up for low prices through Cal Water. They did not address situations like myself, who actually have a tank sitting on my front lawn, but I have to find a water hauler and pay private water prices to fill it up. And then the water hauler who did fill it up last summer, he said, well, if we get fires, we'll all be gone and we won't be able to help you, which is what happened. They were involved with fires. I'm aware that the city of Orland has a program, and I don't know the details of it. I haven't called the phone number. They provide water for domestic use in Glenn County, for potable water for haulers at a rate of $10 per 1,000 gallons to go out and fill up residential users if they have a tank in their yard. So I am asking for you to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to have a similar program. I did hear some talk about that through some of their minutes a couple months ago. Anyway, I guess I neglected to say back in February, I started calling more drillers. I got a credit line on my house. Nobody will even call me back anymore to try and get my well. They say they can't deepen it. I need a new well. So I guess I had two things I wanted to say here. I'm hoping you make that recommendation, and I was just very disappointed to hear that you said you're not going to be making recommendations next Tuesday. It's going to be end of July. I think that's a little late. I think that making a recommendation for people to get water who go dry, whether it's they go pick it up or it gets brought to their house, it needs to be at a reasonable price so they can afford to do it. And I guess my other question just is, I don't know why no drillers are calling me back. And then I thought, well, maybe it's because the legalities of permits are kind of in flux. I don't know. I read a big document a few weeks ago. It looked like someone like me isn't, that I still could get a permit, is what it looked to me like. So I don't know why I can't get anybody even call me back, even come out and even just look. But so I just wondered if you could shed some light on that for me, as just trying to get a, 200 or 200 foot well dug in my front yard, because they've told me they can't deepen it. I have to do a whole new one. That's fine. I got a credit line. I have the money for it. Is that allowed? How can I get somebody? I've been trying since last May to get this done. So I just wondered if there were any things going on that are affecting why I can't seem to get anybody. I did get somebody, but he gave me my money back and said he couldn't do it. So anyway, I am hoping that you could make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors at their meeting next Tuesday for water at a reasonable price for those of us who might lose our water to our house before the end of July or August. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Really quickly, we do have a water hauling program that we are in the process of implementing. So the county did receive money from DWR to do a water hauling program to bring water to homes that do have a storage tank. So we'll get you lined up with that with the Office of Emergency Management. So, and the way that program is also working is that we will have water haulers that are on a list and contracted through the county, I guess is how it's kind of working out, so that even if there are fires, there will be a water hauler available to fill water tanks. So that is part of our drought response program for providing water filling stations, water hauling program to bring water to those with a storage tank. And then we also have a water storage tank program to get water storage tanks to those that are on domestic wells that do not have a storage tank available to them. So we do have that in place, and that program is being implemented. I don't know the exact status of it, but we will get, maybe if Josh is on later, we can get an update, but we do have that program available. So.
Am I allowed to make ask you a
Go ahead.
question? So through this program, and if they came out, would I be paying for water at Cal Water prices? I mean, it'd be $10 per gallon to fill up. And is their trip to my house funded by one of these programs?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So there is some money available to assist people with the expense of it as well.
For 1,000 gallons of water, I'd be very happy with that. I'm really glad to hear you have tanks because like my neighbor said, can I put a splitter on yours because I can't get a tank? And I said, well, sure, we just need to be able to get it filled up. So I just want to clarify what so like if I run out like tomorrow, I can call and I can utilize this program.
I don't know the exact status of where he's at, where the Office of Emergency Management is in getting it all finalized, but it has been in the works for over the last month and a half to 2 months.
So the Board of Supervisors doesn't need a recommendation to do it. It's approved, it's in the works. Maybe it's not ready yet to like come out tomorrow, but it's approved. And
we have received $1.16 million to fund the program. Yes.
So the word will get out to the public when that, and also being able to go to places like last fall to fill up when those things are like ready. Yes. Because I'm hearing they're coming, but that's.
And then in response to, you asked about whether or not you could drill or deepen your well, and there is an executive order, but it does not apply to domestic wells. So if a well driller were to
That's
call you back,
How I interpreted that, so that's
okay, so
good.
you had that right. And then I just had one question about, you had mentioned that with the development across the street, essentially on Eaton, where Cal Water did extend a line but stopped short. If your neighborhood had the opportunity to connect to the Cal Water system, is that something that it seems like your neighbors and you would want to do?
Well, 4 of us are the same. So if our wells go dry, then of course we would. But also what we were told was now that they just paved it, there's a moratorium, I think was the word, that for 5 years they won't dig up the road. Now they did cross the sewer lines to our 3 roads before they paved. I don't know why they wouldn't cross the water lines. My neighbor was in talks with everybody, and I don't understand why Cal Water got to decide, just said, oh, well, we're not going to, versus I went to the city council last summer. That just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, it's close. I mean, yesterday they're out there landscaping the median 250 feet from my house, water going everywhere. So the water lines are halfway across the new pave part of, it's between 99 and Cohasset there. You probably know where it is. They made it 4 lanes, although 2 lanes aren't open yet because of the development going in on that side. And there's a cement barrier in the middle about this wide, and it's all landscaped, and the water goes to that. So it just needs to cross, 2 more lanes. And we haven't run out yet on my street, but, and we have been told that if the water line was available at the end of our street, we have to pay to run it down our street. So we already know that. But
Thank you for your comments.
thank you.
I will put you in touch with the right person for the water hauling.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else in the audience that wants to speak? All right, Jim Brobeck.
Thank you, Cami. The report was tasked with describing a detailed description of potential environmental impacts resulting from supplemental groundwater pumping operations in the region. They explained that the modeling and monitoring tools needed to accomplish this task are not available. It would be helpful if the consultants gave specific recommendations on how to monitor and identify cumulative environmental impacts associated with drought and escalating development of groundwater infrastructure in the 4-county Tuscan aquifer system. The project graphed well depths in Butte County over time. In order to analyze the cumulative impacts to the shared Tuscan aquifer system, future drought impact studies must also track the depth and number of agriculture wells developed in Glenn, Colusa, and Tehama counties, especially what has been developed during the past decade. The study graphed the ratio of rice to orchard agriculture acreage in Butte County. Future studies must graph out the shift of rice and grazing land to orchards in Glenn, Colusa, and Tehama counties. The cumulative impacts to the shared aquifer system resulting from expanding groundwater extraction infrastructure throughout the 4-county region can be anticipated, can be modeled and monitored. Impacts to groundwater-dependent ecosystems, such as the Chico urban forest, the Valley Oak woodlands, and interconnected stream flow, are either avoidable or inevitable, depending on the availability of data and the intentions of water policy management. A balanced aquifer provides the buffer needed to endure periods of drought. An overdrafted aquifer, on the other hand, will eliminate this buffer and result in a severe decline in the regional quality of life. So I look forward to future draft impact studies having some of these improved abilities to analyze the impacts associated with groundwater infrastructure development. Thank you very much for taking my comment.
Thank you, Jim. Any other hands raised? Okay. So with those items in mind. I was thinking perhaps the next course of action, and yes, I understand, and hopefully since we do have a water filling or tank filling program, that the fact that we're not bringing recommendations to the board next week is probably okay. But my thought is, and opinions are welcome, is that we could perhaps list out some of the recommendations that we've heard today and bring it back to this group as kind of in a letter format to bring to the board in July, and maybe flesh out. That way we can combine it with perhaps what the Water Commission. We'll be discussing this again tomorrow, and then flesh out those ideas for a more formal recommendation to the board, keeping kind of a long-term recommendations for long-term drought response in that to the board, if that sounds like a good approach. Okay, great. If there's nothing else, I think we'll move on to the next item. Thank you everyone for your comments as well. I'm going to have, so Kelly, I'm hoping you're still there. I do know Kelly is might have to hop off for a few minutes. So if she's not there, we'll come back to her, but just briefly talk about online resources. Kelly?
Yes, hi, I'm here. This is Kelly Peterson.
Great.
County Water
Can you speak
Resource
just a little louder if you can?
Oh, sure. Sorry,
Great.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yep, this is Kelly Peterson with the Butte County Water and Resource Conservation Department. And I just wanted to give you guys a quick update that there is a new website on the Butte County homepage. So if you just go to buttecounty.net, you can see at the top there's a link for resources for the 2022 drought. If you go through to that, that's where you can find the drought impact analysis study, which Cammie just reviewed and we just talked about. There's also a number of resources on tracking the drought, where to get more information from state resources and federal resources, and also some non-governmental organization resources. It does link also to our drought preparedness and mitigation plan, and also to resources for this drought task force. So if folks are interested in getting more information on upcoming meetings and agendas. Likewise, there are water district websites. So if you're not sure if you're in a water district, you can go ahead and click on each one of those. It's got Cal Water links for both Chico and Oroville, Durham Irrigation District, Richville Irrigation District. So it's all really consolidated in one place to find. There's also quite a few resources for financial resources for residents of Butte County. So you can find that there, as well as agricultural resources, including some of the programs and services through the USDA Farm Service and the Small Business Administration. Likewise, we are currently in the process of updating our department website, and so there will be a number of links there for current hydrological and groundwater conditions, information for private residents who have wells, so information on how to get your well completion log, the phone numbers for the water haulers in the county, etc. There's also a new page on water conservation resources, so that's all linked to all of this and tips on how to save water. In addition, in relation to some of those programs that you were speaking about, Cammie, the Office of Emergency Management has those three programs like you were talking about: the water filling station, the temporary tank program for storing water, and also the water hauling program to fill those tanks up. There's going to be a link as well to current information on that from this buttecounty.net/drought website. So as we get more things on there, we'll keep you posted. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I don't see Josh on here, but I think we've covered our small community drought relief program. by discussing the water hauling opportunities. I'm going to jump to environmental health. Elaine, I have you down for discussing the executive order and the well permit process that we have been working on. Hopefully she's still there.
I am. Thank you,
Great.
Kenny.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I wasn't sure what all you wanted me to go into, but we did issue a press release last night resuming the permitting of water well permits. We worked in coordination with Cammie's team, Water Resource Conservation, and other county departments, including county council, to develop or update our current well permitting process to comply with the state order. I can pull up that flow chart, Cammie, and share my screen if you'd like. I just wasn't sure how much detail you wanted me to go into.
Sure, I think that would be great. That way more people are exposed to the process that we've set up.
Okay, let me make sure I have that ready to go. Okay, can you all see that okay?
Yes.
And actually, before we talk about that, I want to just share the press release with everybody. This did go out to the media outlets yesterday evening. And there aren't a lot of details here, but letting the public know that we are resuming accepting water well permit applications. And there are resources here with the press release. There is a link here to the GSA map viewer where folks can look to see if their proposed well location is going to be in a GSA. And then also there is a link to our environmental health website where our updated well application packet is posted and has all of the information folks would need to apply for a well permit under the order. Are there any questions about that before I move on to the well review process?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. So this is just a quick overview of what we worked on. And I wasn't prepared to go into this in full detail, but happy to field questions. The main differences from our normal well permit application process are going to be the additional reviews for the GSAs. So if you're interested in drilling a well, you pull our well application packet. It has all of the instructions and documents and resources that you would need to do that. And environmental health will continue to complete their typical reviews that was before the order was issued. And then there are some additional review items that we'll be looking at. One of which is a form declaring whether, basically the type of use of the well. It's going to let us know if your well is exempt from the order or not. So small domestic drinking water wells and public water wells are going to typically be exempt from the order. And so we have forms for that so that we can address that as part of our application process. And we will also then have these acknowledgement forms from the GSA. So each GSA is developing this acknowledgement form that addresses the order. So let's see. And I can bring the order up as well if anyone wants to look at that again. There were basically two main sections in the order, section 9A and 9B, that really applied to well permitting, that we worked to update our well process, our well review process to comply with those two items. So once your application comes in and we determine are you exempt from the order or not, then there's a path or workflow for that. If you're exempt, we're going to be going through our normal environmental health well permit review. And if you are not exempt, meaning the order applies to the well, then we will go through this workflow as well. Is it in a subbasin or not? And if it is not, then again, it's going to go through our normal environmental health well permit review. There is a little bit, there's additional language on our well application form that addresses 9B, which is the section of the order here. And so if you are within a subbasin, then we are going to, you'll go through review with Water Resource and Conservation, in addition to the normal environmental health reviews for well permits. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. If you're interested in the specifics of the process, we can certainly talk about that offline, or you can look at our well application packet on our website.
And Elaine, just to clarify, so the Department of Water and Resource Conservation, or my department, will be reviewing the applications to confirm the subbasin that the permittee is located. And then the department will also just be reviewing the location of the well and its proximity to our monitoring well network, correct? So I think that's what, so when people see that the Water and Resource Conservation Department is doing a review, that's what we're looking at the applications for, just confirming the basin that they're in. And
right.
Yeah. And so it's what we have really, especially with the GSPs now in place, really needing to ensure that we protect the monitoring network, including the representative monitoring site wells, the RMS wells too, so that well installation doesn't affect those wells' ability to provide adequate data.
Right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for Elaine? Okay, thanks, Elaine.
Thanks, Tammy.
Next, I'm going to turn it over to, oh, there is a hand raised. Go ahead. Go ahead, Kelly.
I was just going to let you know that there is a participant with their hand raised.
Oh, thanks. Oh,
Okay.
Supervisor Lucero. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I am curious about this process, and I don't want to belabor it here, but I was just wondering how you, is there going to be a process to coordinate with the GSAs that will be spelled out by your department, Cami? And also, how do you calculate the cumulative effect? I understand we have 17 wells that are being considered now, and all but one are agricultural wells. So I'm wondering, what defines a large diameter well? What defines a small diameter? How many gallons per minute do they pump? What's the profile of each of the wells? Is it because, the wells failed, or they're deepening their wells? Do we look at the cumulative effect of the wells? Are these the kinds of things that are taken into consideration, or is it only the 1,200 foot distance from another well? Anyway, those are some of my thoughts.
This is Elaine again. Thank you, Supervisor Lucero. We did see your email with those questions, and we are working to answer those for you. But I can say that we use in our Butte County well ordinance, we have well spacing requirements that we are applying to those well permit reviews. And it depends on the pumping capacity specifically as to what that horizontal separation distance needs to be. And we are happy to meet with you and discuss that. And we are working to answer those questions as well.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't want to belabor it here. I just wanted to, I know I'm going to get questions on this, and I'd like to understand the process so that I can articulate it.
Right. Okay. And in addition to the well spacing requirements, we also have a 50 gallon per minute per acre limit on a parcel. So we look at that when we're reviewing well applications. But we are happy to meet with you and go into whatever level of detail you would like to discuss on the well review process.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
I will just add with regard to the GSAs, what we anticipate, what staff from the Department of Water and Resource Conservation anticipates is that we will provide quarterly updates, if not monthly, but usually quarterly. That's when environmental health has their well permit numbers. They provide them quarterly, but we will provide that information to the GSA so that they have it as part of their records so that they can monitor how many wells are being installed within their GSA boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Thank you, Elaine. I'm going to hand it off to Louis and then Luis. So Louis, for any ag impacts or updates, is he still here? There, yes.
This is Louis, I'm still here. We're more of a regulatory agency. We have dealt with a lot of water issues. Like I said earlier, we're still, and Luis can confirm, I think we're around 80 to 85,000 acres of ice. Tracy Shore from the UC Cooperative Extension sent out a memo about a month ago regarding the dry land conditions for the rangeland pasture land that usually would brown out in May. They started browning in March of this year. But other than that, irrigations, of course, have begun earlier than normal for this year because of the drought. Last significant rainfall we saw, I think, was at the end of December. When we saw the most significant rainfall, and for that it's been pretty dry. So we have irrigations for orchards, and I'm trying to think what else we have out there. Orchards, I probably could add some more information. But other than that, I think that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you, Louis. Luis?
Yeah, no, I really don't have any more updates. Nothing new since our last meeting. Like Louis said, we're probably 80% planted in Butte County, which is great compared to other parts of the Sacramento Valley for rice and orchards. Like I said earlier, there's some anecdotal events where issues with pumping, but overall seems to be okay.
Great, thank you. Question, Supervisor Lucero, I see that your hand's up.
Hi, I just had, I think Luis actually answered the question, but so this is for Louis. Do normally we plant 100,000 acres? And so when you say 80%, then that's now 80,000 acres. Is that correct?
Louis, yeah, okay.
For Luis or Louis, but on a normal year, all the rice, we would probably be around, I would say anywhere from 90 to 100,000 acres of rice, traditional. So over the last several years, it's obviously been down around 90 to 95. This year, it appears to be between 80, 85,000 acres of what we're going to have planted total rice this year.
Okay. And Louis, that's simply because of water allocation?
For this year, I think so. That's my understanding with the water. Again, it's the market is up for rice this year, so we're going to see growers plant as much as they can. Ultimately, we have to wait until we do the full crop report for 2022, which won't get done until next year in 2023, to actually find out how many actual acres were harvested.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you. I don't think we have anyone from CAL FIRE to report out. All right. And are there any other reports, anyone I have forgotten or anything come up that anyone wants to report? Okay, good. Great.
Yeah, this is Dan from the NRCS again. The one thing that I would like to report, and I'm not sure how we could move this forward to the County Board of Supervisors or what it would entail, but I worked with several forest landowners and rangeland landowners, and mostly because of the proximity, they get or come across illegal water takes for pot grows and that kind of thing. Probably the biggest impact is going to be for wildlife and to wildlife. We do have them where they, illegally take water out of some district water or something like that. But the impacts there are pretty severe, especially when you start talking about wildlife. When I was on this task force in previous years, we did have an issue on who would be the hand of enforcement to stop this. And if there's one thing that we might be able to do is resolve that. If it's going to be, California Fish and Wildlife Service or county sheriff's department, whichever kind of entity it falls upon, we would like to be able to share that more broadly on who they can report, who a person could report an illegal water take to, if that's something we can do.
Are you saying most of the illegal water takes are probably taking water from districts or
natural water bodies?
Okay.
Both occur just as often. Sometimes it's even out of a rancher's pond or something like that as well. Sometimes it's even on their own property. They're just in a location where it's not visible to the landowner. It happens on Forest Service ground, of course, so we expect the Forest Service to use their own law enforcement. But I know their enforcement branch is really thin. So if there's a way we can stop this, if it's county or California Fish and Wildlife Service, or even if it's some kind of shared agreement with Forest Service where the enforcement arm can address that.
Great, thank you. Kelly, I see that you have a comment.
Yes, and thank you, Dan, for that comment. I know that we were tracking that down earlier when we were talking about this last year too. There is a section on our website. We did get a couple of frequently asked questions about that, and we did get some contacts. So there's some state water board contacts on reporting illegal water hauling or water diversions. And so there's a state water board contact, and then also a CDFW, which is the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's a regional contact on there as well. And I'm happy to send the link out. We can send that over to you if you'd like.
I will also note that many of the water districts, such as South Feather, Water and Power, have been working to make sure that people cannot take water from their hydrants and have been working to take care of that. And I'm sure many of the other water purveyors are doing that as well. But that had been an issue, I know, for them for a while. I don't see any other hands raised. There was one, but it's gone. All right, thank you. Any other comments, reports? Anyone from the public wishing to address the Drought Task Force on issues not listed or covered today? All right, I wanted to have a brief discussion about standardizing our date and time for this meeting, so we're not scrambling each month to get something on the calendar. I don't know if there are times best we can either do it via doodle poll. I am thinking that if it is the week, maybe perhaps between board meetings is probably good for many of us, since we're all county employees. perhaps like a Thursday afternoon or something. Maybe I can throw that out there, like the third Thursday of the month. And we can propose something like that in the afternoon. I don't know if someone has some standing thing that it absolutely wouldn't work. Although I'm with Kelly, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm probably the one that has the most limiting schedule with all the GSA board meetings. But I'll put something together in some kind of poll, and we'll get something scheduled for probably a month from now or so that we can get something on the calendar. I think per the drought plan, it does talk about during drought years, we would meet more often, and then in moderate years, obviously less often, and in wet years, hopefully not at all. But maybe having something available. So we'll do that and send that out and confirm our next dates subsequent to the meeting. And with that, I think we'll adjourn. Thank you.